Hi everyone. So today we shall be basically describing regarding the CM2 paper, how many chapters are there, a brief description regarding the paper, what all prerequisites are there, and so on. So expect this session to be roughly close to 1 hour. So let me just share my screen with you all. These would be the topics, 10 pointers on the basis of which we shall be having the discussion in today's class. So to begin with, what exactly CM2 is all about. So at a very high level, CM2 basically deals with investments. There are a lot of, let's say, financial instruments, be it options, shares, bonds, derivatives. We are going to study as in how to go about pricing them. So that is one component. I guess Nishan, that might be an issue at your end. I hope others aren't facing any issue with the voice lagging. Yes, so one part of CM2 basically deals with the pricing of financial instruments, more specifically options. We would be looking at what exactly options are, as well as bonds. Then another part is like the more generic part is the relation between risk and return. So you might have heard ki if you're looking for, let's say, higher returns, you'll have to take what higher risk. So that is the relation which we keep using is ki if we are looking for, let's say, higher returns, then that generally involves taking higher risk. Again, note that there is a difference between the actual returns you're going to get and the expected returns. It could be that you've taken a lot of risk. Let's say you have invested in some cryptocurrency, yet you end up with having negative returns. So here what we're talking about is the relation between risk and the expected return. Now in the course, there we would be seeing in a specific chapter that there are different ways to define or measure risk. The most frequently used is basically using the variance. If we have a particular random variable and if I calculate its variance, then that can be used as a proxy for the risk. Higher is the variance, higher would be the risk associated with a particular risk, with a particular investment. So compared to, let's say, CM1, CS1 or CS2 or even CB papers, the level of understanding, in-depth understanding for few topics in CM2 is going to be less. More specifically, there are 2 to 3 chapters where there is a lot of content given in the material, but how is that coming is something which is not mentioned, and that is something which is beyond the scope of syllabus. If you would want to go ahead and would want to see how certain formulas are being coming up, or let's say certain definitions, certain theorems, then again these are something which would be available in the papers written by noble scholars. So for few specific chapters, you might not get that sort of clarity, as to how the things are beginning and how we're applying it. But at least from exam point of purpose, you would be in a position to know what exactly you need to apply and how to solve a particular question. Some of the students do find clearing CM2 or the equivalent CT8 paper under old curriculum to be more challenging. For me, I would say studying CM2 is comparatively difficult, whether it is CS2, CS1 or CM1. But clearing wise, I would say it's a lot more easier compared to a paper like CS2. So this was a brief description regarding CM2. As for the prerequisite knowledge, again, like any other actuarial papers, it is assumed that students does have knowledge of English and the concepts of maths taught in school till class 12. Apart from that, for actuarial papers, this would be drawing knowledge from CS1, more specifically random variables, calculation of mean, variance, so on, probabilities as well. Then CS2 also, a lot of topics chapter wise would be drawing knowledge from CS2, although it's not, I would say, mandatory to have studied CS2 before CM2, but just to get a clear understanding of what we are trying to do in few chapters, having knowledge of CS2 really helps. But just from exam point of exam training point of view, one could start with CM2 before CS2 as well. And apart from that, just a basic knowledge of CM1 is there. That is just to do with time value of money, wherein if there is a cash flow, let's say at time capital T, if you need to find its present value, you need to discount it with for the interest part. So apart from that, there is no other prerequisite. As for the applications, whatever you're gonna study in CM2, in which papers you could find relation. So you are going to find relation in CV1. There is a particular capital asset pricing model which we are going to study in CM2. That is there in CV1. Apart from that, utility theory is a chapter which is something you would have studied in paper CV2 as well. And along with that, for higher papers, be it paper CP1, CP2, CP3, or the specific SP5, SP6 papers, all of these assumes that the students have the knowledge of the paper CM2. So this was the prerequisite knowledge. I would say more generally the basic concepts of CS1 and few specific concepts of CS2. For CM1, it is just a basic idea regarding the concept of time value of money. Next part, third component is the usage of calculator. So again, the calculator which I would suggest is be using is the Casio model FX82 ES Plus. Do keep in mind, currently given the online set of examinations for IFoA, there is no restriction on the use of calculator. You could use any model of calculator, but for our purpose, the Casio model should be fine. In case you need to perform any sort of higher functions, be it integrations or anything else, you can always take the help of Google or any other softwares, given that these are allowed for calculation purpose in examinations. Keep in mind, you need to show the entire working. Just for the calculation aid part, you could take help of any particular software. As for actuarial tables, so I'll be directly referring to the formula section. So mathematical methods is there, which is being covered in from page number 2 to page number 5. A part of it would be required in CM2. Statistical distributions, again, if you recall from your early studies, it's fine. If not, in case any distributions do come up, which is not let's say regularly used, you can take help of it. Statistical methods, compound interest is something which not be there. From page 38 onwards, parts of maybe stochastic process and economic models and financial derivatives, these all sections would be required. Apart from that, the usual section, that is post page number 160, wherein you have the probability values and the p values, or should I say percentage points, these all will also be required in CM2. So this was regarding the use of calculator and actuarial tables. Next, coming to the paper pattern, the exam format and the pass marks, whether you're appearing from II or IFoA, whether it's the July term, September term or December term. So to begin with, there are two components, just like other papers, whether it's CS series or CM1, we have a paper A and a paper B. The paper A is usually referred to as the theoretical part, you could say, or the written examination. Although the exams are online, paper B part is basically applying the concepts you have studied in the paper A part with the help of Microsoft Excel. Do note in mind, compared to CM1, you will see a lot more questions in paper B which are commentary based. In CM1, the proportion of that was slightly lower, but in CM2, specifically paper B, you would see a relatively higher proportion of comments based question. Same is true for, I would say, CM2A as well. Right now, given that the exams are open book in nature, so not a lot of direct theory questions are there, but still you could expect anywhere between 10 to 20 marks, which are wordy based questions. Could be application based theory, could be usage of certain, let's say, definitions or explaining a particular scenario. So each of these papers are of 100 marks. For IFoA, 70% weightage is given to paper A and 30% weightage is given to paper B. So again, what happens is a single score is generated out of 100, on the basis of which you would be either clearing the exam or, let's say, failing the exam. There is no individual pass marks for paper A or paper B. It's in the entirety which is being seen. Just keep one thing in mind. To clear the paper, it is necessary that you have submitted the document for both paper A and paper B. So just a theoretical scenario, if a student is scoring 90 out of 100 in paper A, that translates to 63 marks out of, let's say, of the 70 component. And let's say a student submits a blank document for paper B, then he or she would be scoring a 0, contribution will be 0, and the total marks shall be 63. Assuming that the pass marks is less than 63, this particular student would have cleared the paper. But had the student, let's say, not submitted paper B, although the marks allotted would have been 0, but he or she would not have cleared the exam, because it's mandatory that you are submitting document for both paper A and paper B. So this was for IFoA. As for pass marks, for CM2 among all the papers, the pass marks relatively has been high. It has usually been in the range of 58 to 62. And I would say at a conservative basis, for other papers, we take it generally to be 60. For CM2, I would say take it to be a 62 or a 63. Although in the last 1.5 years from IFoA, students have struggled to complete the paper. It's not that questions are very difficult. It's just that the amount of typing you need to do is way higher. And I would say compared to all other papers, students struggle the most in CM2 for some reason, because the type of questions they are giving, it naturally takes time to solve it on MS Word. Yet, keeping in mind that the pass marks tends to be in the higher range only. So you could assume that the pass marks could be anywhere between 62 for the coming session. As for the II part, before that, again, exams are intended to remain online only for the September 2022 session. No MCQs are expected for paper A part. Paper B is the usual one, which is being held on Microsoft Excel. Shouldn't expect any MCQs for the paper A part. As for II, the July 2022 session is going to be online in nature. MCQs are expected in paper A. It could be anywhere in the range of 10 to 40% of the paper. You just need to write the correct option. The workings of that is something which is not required. For December term, IAI has communicated its intention to conduct the exams in offline format if the situation permits. In that scenario, whether we would have MCQ or not is something we need to check. At least before the pandemic, whenever the exams were held, there was no MCQ component for the CM2 or the equivalent CT8 paper earlier. The pass marks for II is fixed to be 50. In one of the documents, they had mentioned regarding this pass marks of 50, although it was later not available in the website. But looking at the pass marks in the previous sessions for all papers, it is 50 only. There is no, I would say, proper clarification, at least to my knowledge, regarding whether 70-30% weightage holds or not. Because at one place, I had mentioned that students need to separately clear paper A and paper B. So that effectively means that a student needs to score 50 plus both in paper A and paper B. Now, whatever weightage you put to those, at least for passing purpose, your final marks would be greater than 50 only. In case you're looking for final calculation of marks, or you're looking towards securing a rank, let's say, in that case, you could assume it to be 70% and 30% itself. But apart from that, from passing point of view, do ensure that you are scoring at least a 50 each in paper A as well as paper B. So this was regarding the exam format and all. Again, as compared to other papers, feel free to use either equation editor or the notation sheet released by IFoA or mix and match. Which one is preferable? There is no correct answer to that. Whichever one you find convenient, keep using that. The only difference is that some of you might find mathematical typing to be a bit more time consuming, especially if you haven't really practiced on it. But when it comes to reading the answers, it just gives a more structured view. But again, either case, whether using just mathematical typing or using IFoA notation sheet or any other sensible notations or mix and match is permitted. As for II, there is no notation sheet as such released by it. Prefer using symbols. In case you're using the textual component, make sure you're not using extremely, let's say, short form, which the examiner might not be able to understand. So just in case you need to write a sigma, either you can use the text editor available in the format in which you sit for exams from IFoA. Alternatively, you could write sigma in Word, but avoid writing anything as SGMA or something like that. Do not use, let's say, normal messaging language. Prefer to use the entire full, let's say, textual component. So this was regarding the paper format and the pattern and all. Next part is how many number of chapters are there, what's the relative difficulty, which chapters are more difficult, is there any connection between different chapters. So on that, we have a total of 21 chapters, irrespective of whichever material you are using, whether it's the 2019 version or 2022 version or any version. The number of chapters remains the same. There are very small minor upgrades from 2019 to 2022 for paper CM2. So in case any one of you is using the CM2 2019 material, it's fine to be used. Just keep in mind you are looking at the, let's say, the material upgrade over the years from 2019 to 2022. So we have a total of 21 chapters. Just like other papers, the entire CM2 paper has been divided into 4 parts. I hope you all are aware regarding what exactly X assignments are. X assignments could be thought of, let's say, mock exams, which covers a cluster of chapters. Y assignments are equivalent for the paper B part. So for CM2, we have 4 X assignments, and Y assignments, as far as I recall, you basically have 2 Y assignments for same. Of all these chapters, the most fundamentally difficult chapter, whether it's from understanding point of view, whether it's reading material or even solving new type of questions, students really struggle in chapters 15, 16, and 17. More precisely, chapter 16 and 17, which is the 5-step method. Black-Scholes option pricing formula, at least you understand what is happening. While solving questions, if some application-based questions come, you might struggle a bit, but these 3 chapters are ones where students struggle the most. And initially, for trying to read from the material, I would say chapter number 10 is again an equally difficult one. So when you would be reading the material, especially ones who try to, let's say, are studying on its own, I myself took a couple of months just to understand what we're trying to do over here. A simple reason is that we have dealt with Newtonian calculus, where we know that integration of x is x square by 2. Now here we will be seeing that the integration of x is not x square by 2. And this is a different branch of calculus known as stochastic calculus. So here you will see that, let's say we are integrating something called a bt, that will not be bt square by 2. In fact, it will be something else altogether. So again, the application part of chapter 10, I would say, is fairly straightforward. Once you solve the questions from past years, you will understand that the things are, pretty much the same. Of all the papers in CM2, you would actually see the same sort of numericals coming in. Not obviously all questions, but you would frequently see that the same numericals have come in having exactly the same values. Specifically for this chapter number 10, like there are a couple of questions. One question I do recall, it has probably come thrice in the last 10 years with almost exactly the same structure as well as the same numerical values. So again, this was another chapter which students might struggle in. Apart from that, the knowledge of CS2 predominantly is required in chapter number 20, which is basically ruin theory. It assumes the knowledge of reinsurance as well as risk model, which I've studied from paper CS2. Again, chapter number 18, term structure of interest rates. Some students do struggle with this. So this chapter effectively has just 2 things. One part is completely derivation and it's intensive derivation. The other part is completely theoretical. Now, given the current set of open book examinations, neither is generally being asked. At least in this term, April 22 term, after a long time, there was actually a question from term structure of interest rates. Not even, I would say, directly, but somewhat combined for, let's say, chapter 18 and chapter number 19. As for the independence of it, chapter 20 and chapter 21 are completely independent. It does not require knowledge of any other previous chapters from CM2. Apart from that, chapter 1 to chapter number 8, you could think all of these to be independent in nature mostly. Few chapters here or there might have some references to other previous chapters. From chapter 9 onwards, it's a different thing altogether. 9 is an independent chapter, 10 uses the information of chapter 9, 11 is mostly a theoretical chapter, does require some sort of knowledge from chapter 9 and chapter 10. Then we have chapter number 12, again that is independent in nature, where we would be, let's say, talking more in details with respect to what exactly is a equity, options, forwards, and how to price them. Greeks again requires the knowledge of chapter number 12. So how if you want to break the paper is, the first, let's say, 8 chapters are sort of independent. Then I would say chapter number 9 to chapter number 14, and then let's say 15 to 19. From chapter 15 onwards, I would say it kind of requires some or the other knowledge from all the earlier chapters, more specifically from chapter number 9 to 13, and certain parts here and there from the earlier 8 chapters as well. So in most of the terms, I start the classes from chapter number 9 because chapter 9 to 14, let's say, draws upon 15 to 18 or 15 to 19, where students tend to struggle a lot. At times I have started serially itself. So how I would be going is sort of more dependent which session it is, whether it's the April session or the September session, the type of students, whether those are working in nature or whether those are, let's say, students pursuing undergrad or postgrad. Honestly, till now, this time I'm not decided yet. I thought to go, let's say, serial wise only, but might start with chapter 9 as well, given that it might take more time to absorb things from chapter number 9 onwards. Also, do keep in mind chapter number 12, characteristics of derivative securities. There's a particular part in this which basically refers to, let's say, principle of no arbitrage, which is being used to price financial products. So students tend to struggle here a lot because here what you need to do is, uh, depending on the data given in the question, you need to basically create two portfolios. So you could think it's something to be similar like what you might have studied in CS2 in the form of Markov models, where you need to construct a model. Here it's not that difficult, but let's say you need to start with two portfolios. Which portfolio should have what sort of financial instruments? That is something, it depends what the question wants us. And then you need to show that, let's say, the value of the two portfolios either remain same at all the time or one is greater than the other, and on basis of that you could either price a particular product or you could, let's say, prove certain inequalities. So students do tend to struggle in this particular section as well. So this was regarding the chapters, the difficulty part, as well as the connection part. Again, chapter 21, I would say, is extremely important if you are looking to work either in general insurance or health insurance. Although it is being given in CM2, but I still feel it doesn't make sense why runoff triangles has been given here. The name of the paper is Financial Engineering and Loss Reserving. So runoff triangles basically is the reserving component. If you have data regarding the past claims, using certain projection methods, you need to calculate how much more claims we could get in future. So for an interview, for a job interviews preparation point of view, runoff triangles is the single most important thing from CM2, and it is almost a given that, let's say, if you're giving an interview for a GI based company, or let's say once you try to switch between companies and you have been working in general insurance setup, your most of the questions would be around runoff triangles and reinsurance, which is basically a part of CS2. Again, just let me inform you, runoff triangles, scoring wise, it's an extremely easy topic. You will just see that there are 4 simple formulas you need to apply and calculate stuff. But when you try to get into the depth of things, what assumptions we are using, what is the significance of that, it has a lot of stuff. Again, some of which you might be able to only appreciate if you, let's say, are working in a general insurance setup, because in paper SP7, that is for general insurance reserving, we again have a chapter on runoff triangles, which is close to 140 to 150 pages. That is one of the single most largest chapters in the entire actual curriculum. So again, that has to more do with the qualitative part. Here, at least for exam point of view, it's mostly going to be the quantitative part. And then you would also try to look at the assumptions. What do they mean? What are we exactly assuming by them? When and where, what to assume, and so on. Moving next, as to how to go about practicing for CM2. So the first thing which you need to do is basically attend the live classes, be it an online or offline format. And in case you're looking for pre-recorded lectures, complete all the conceptual classes. We will shortly take a look at, for CM2, the number of conceptual lectures is relatively very less. Almost most of the chapters will require, at least from my end, one particular class only to cover things. So you need to attend these conceptual classes. These are sort of mandatory in nature. Apart from that, you need to read the material. I mean, only for CM2, I could say for a couple of chapters, if you want to ignore reading the material, after once giving it a shot, feel free to do that, because there are some of the things, however much time you spend, simply using your current set of knowledge and what is there in CM2 material, it's not sufficient to understand things. If you want to get into the depth of things, you could either use a particular book. Again, that is something which is actually required if you prepare for higher papers like SP5 and SP6. So you could either use Hull and White. financial economics, or you could use, let's say, Baxter and Rennie. Or apart from that, you could directly use the research papers of Nobel laureates available in on YouTube itself. So, as I mentioned, specifically for chapter number 10, stochastic calculus, 5-step method, there would be a lot of things. You'll just have to take it as given. You'll know certain ways how to apply that, but the entire mathematics behind it is something which is not there. You could find it in books, and more so, these are available in the paper SP6. Again, for purpose of CM2, it's not expected that you'll go and study for SP6. Just that for complete understanding, a lot of things, honestly, I also understood while I was going through paper SP6. Then I was able to appreciate exactly what we're trying to do. Other than that, solving wise, you know what to do, but how the things are coming by using a particular method, you might be a little bit clueless about it. And the reason you would find a lot of seniors, specifically the ones who appeared in the old curriculum, is obviously that time there were not so many coachings and all. Most of them had to do self-study, and I would say CT8 or CM2 is the most difficult paper to self-prepare, at least the few chapters. For me also, for certain topics like stochastic calculus, it took me 2 months just to understand what they are trying to do. Else I was stuck with the fact that y is in the integration of x square by 2. And then there are other certain chapters as well, like 5-step method. Lot of formulas are there. It took a lot of time just on one random date stuck me. Okay, the chapter is all about a particular formula. There are certain steps, let's say 5 steps, which are trying to prove it. In trying to prove them, we are using various theorems, we are using various corollaries, so on, which have their independent applications. But again, you might not be able to relate it to exactly, let's say a real life case. Major advantage of studying CM2 is you will be aware regarding the financial products. If any one of you has interest in stock markets, you would be able to see, how you exactly go about pricing them, and the models which you are going to study here are precisely the one, even in practical scenarios, we assume those models only to hold true. So whether it's, let's say, options, futures, so on, or let's say even bonds, you will see how we can go about modeling these. So as I was mentioning, if you want, try giving a shot to all the chapters, two selected chapters, chapter number, I guess 10, 15, 16, 17. If you're not understanding, if you're short on time, give it a miss. Again, this is towards the end of examination. Right now, try it. If you're not understanding it, it's completely fine. Then once you're done with this, there are obviously questions at the end of material. For CM2, I would say there are not a really lot of good questions at the end of material. A lot of them is book workish or theoretical in nature, something again which is not very much relevant to the current set of examination pattern. Nonetheless, you should be practicing it. Apart from that, we shall be sharing the revision notes with you. I assume that most of you would be aware what exactly is there in revision notes. So the version, first of all, which I would be sharing with all of you is the 2019 version. The reason of not sharing the latest season is simply because we have curated a lot of videos over the past couple of years. For CM2, I would say if there are 200 questions, maybe 10 or 15 questions are not covered in our videos. The rest, almost all questions have explanation covered in our videos. So the numbering as per the 2019 version, everything which is there is completely relevant to the current syllabus. So there is no necessity or compulsion for you all to look at, let's say, 2020, 21 or 22 version. This is completely fit to be used. This was for the practice pattern, and apart from that, again, for ones appearing from IFoA, you should be targeting to complete all papers from 2005 to 2022. And if you're done with that, if you have more time, again, you can give the ones from IIA a shot. Just keep in mind, the last 2-3 years are fine. You might be in a position to solve them. You will see that some questions are more difficult. As you go 2018 or prior, the level of difficulty is extremely high. If you would be looking at the past results from IIA, in a term, maybe one student, two students, or three students are clearing out of maybe 20, 30, or 40 setting. And there is a genuine difficulty in the type of questions they have given. Some of which, if you will actually see, the whole explanation of those is given in paper SP6. So they have tested that in CM2 here, but actually the whole explanation of that is there in paper SP6. So this was regarding the practice. Apart from that, as for the mapping to the old curriculum, so we have 21 chapters, out of which 18 chapters are from CT8 itself. There were 18 chapters in CT8. Chapter number 5, Stochastic Model of Investment Returns. This was previously part of paper CT1 under the old curriculum. Chapter 20 and chapter 21, this was part of paper CT6. And apart from that, also while doing chapter number 12, parts of it earlier were there in both CT1 and CT8. So for our analysis, just using CT8 paper shall also do our job. So for 2019 earlier papers, you need to solve the entire CT8 paper. There might be certain changes, I would say, which is there in chapter number 3. So earlier, before 2019, the theoretical content was slightly different compared to what we have right now. Even while you would be looking at the questions in revision notes, you will see that a lot of questions for this topic have been picked up from SP5. So you will see 20-25 marks question. Those are not honestly relevant for CM2 paper. They have been given just for completeness because similar topics have been tested in paper SP5 as well. Apart from that, I missed out the entire revision notes, if I'm not wrong. I guess it has been divided into 9 booklets. Again, 6 booklets were there in CT8. We have 3 different chapters. Each one of them has its own individual booklet. So this was as for the mapping to the old curriculum. Next question, which a lot of you tend to ask, is the idle hours to devote, and so a very generic statement, I would say very useless, is 250 hours. You have time, let's say around 150 days for your IFoA September 2022 term. Take it on average 3 hours on a daily basis or 20 hours on a weekly basis, results into something like 450 hours. Again, some of you might be able to clear the paper giving way less than time, might still fail the paper giving way more time. Thing is, keep to be consistent as much as you can, so that at a later point of, just to be able to appreciate stuff. The earlier you study, the more you can appreciate the stuff. Towards the end, your inclination, and to an extent even my inclination, to be, to ensure that you actually end up clearing the examination. So if you want to compare to other papers, the number of hours you need to devote for practicing CM2, I would say something less than CS2. Way less than CM1. CM1 takes a lot of time to practice. CM2 will not take much time to practice. Leaving 2-3 chapters, the other chapters are fairly straightforward. So the relative time which you would require, I would say, would be slightly less than CS2, assuming that you have studied for CS2 earlier. Next is how to go about mathematical typing or dealing with the, let's say, the online form of examination. Once you have sat for papers in the online format, you all can directly start practicing on MS Word. If you're more comfortable in understanding concepts by solving it on paper for the first couple of months, 2 to 3 months, feel free to solve it on paper. Progressively, you should be shifting everything towards MS Word itself, and not later than 2 months. And again, not mentioning this because you all are studying CM2. In CM2, if you ask any of your seniors, even the ones who have appeared for exams in this session, they did find the paper easy, but they were not able to complete it. So that is why you need to focus a bit more here on the mathematical typing. Not that you see something fancy over here. Almost all the notations you have done in earlier papers, those things are only there. Just that the type of questions they ask, you need to give a lot of steps and all. So that does consume a lot of time. And here you might not even have the, let's say, that sort of privilege to use the shortcuts and all, or the notations given in the notation sheet, because if you have sigma being used thrice on a particular line along with rho, vega, so on, it's not possible to write everything in words and fit in one line. And if you're trying to fit it in 4 lines, next thing you know is if you're trying to read it, you yourself will get confused whether it's sigma square, what is divided by what, so on. So it does take a bit of time to go about the typing pattern. As for completion of syllabus, so again, right now we have intention to keep on average, let's say 4 classes every week. Paper A, paper B would be held parallelly. It could be that in certain weeks, depending on the requirements or your preparation, all classes are of paper A. It could be in some week all classes are of paper B. right now what we had thought was the weekdays would be for paper A, the weekends would be for paper B, but again these could change depending on the progress all made. Also the frequency of classes would be slightly higher in the months of May and June, given that a lot of you do not have any examinations in college or have your colleges to be off. So 8th August is the last date which we have in mind, but again we could be in a position to complete it way before that. And compared to all other papers, CM2, I myself, I am mostly in a position to complete it beforehand. What happens is, as I would be mentioning shortly, the number of conceptual classes required is very less. Hardly, I will see it's 25 or so. So it's like even if I'm keeping 5 classes in a week, covering 5 topics, 5 chapters are done. And you would be able to understand everything in class. Obviously, you need to go back home, practice more questions. So what I have generally seen in the last few years is, after let's say completing first 14 chapters, there is almost a gap in classes, at least for paper A part, for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, because you all need time to cover up everything, and then only I can start with chapter 15. Because without covering specifically chapter 9 to chapter number 14, you won't be able to understand anything which is there in chapter 15, 16, 17, 18, or 19 onwards. So we could complete the syllabus beforehand as well, but yeah, August 8 remains the internal deadline for us. So, and again, I would keep suggesting you all the last 4 to 6 weeks, CM2 exam again, generally it's held towards the end of the session itself. So again, from IFoA, if I'm not wrong, this is being held probably towards the last week of September or so. So you will have close to 6-7 weeks, even if we complete the syllabus on August 8, should be, you should have ideally completed the conceptual lectures, be it paper A or paper B, reading from the material for the bulk of the chapters, leaving few specific ones, maybe the material questions, as well as revision notes by August 8, so that the last 4-6 weeks you can devote complete to solving paper, correcting them, more importantly, documenting where you're going wrong. A lot of you, I will say, will feel a lot of difficulty in chapter 10. You have that in mind because maybe your concepts are not completely clear, but when you will see, you are always scoring full marks in that chapter. Similarly, other chapters might look a bit easier on the face of it, but consistently you are making errors. So instead of believing your prior gut or your prior estimate regarding which chapter is difficult, it's always better to solve the paper and just see what data is suggesting, where exactly you're losing marks, so that you can work over it. So I guess this is what all I had to discuss. Now, if you'll have any queries, any non-academic queries, like don't ask academic doubts in this particular session. Apart from that, any other questions you might have with respect to CM2 and all. And again, I will say it is not as difficult as clearing compared to CS2. All my batchmates, one senior to me, had a big, what to say, they always scared from paper CT8. That is not the case. Specifically, once you are studying, you would be knowing, what exactly you need to cover, what exactly comes in examination, how to, go about applying it to score marks. It is not going to be that difficult. Also, I missed this thing, so let me just cover this as well. So for chapter 1, that is my efficient market hypothesis. It's a theoretical chapter, should take me 1 class or so to complete. Utility theory, it has slight theory, mostly numericals. It could take a one long class, maybe 2.5 hours, or I could do it in 2 classes. Let's take it 1 class only. Stochastic dominance and behavioral finance. Again, behavioral finance, a lot of you might have read articles regarding us and all the almost all our models assumes that investors are rational, but in reality that is not the case. Depending how you frame questions, depending how you present the data, there is always a sort of biasness in let's say the final intended decision which the investors make. So we will understand what different reasons are why investors might take irrational decision and still might feel happier even though they are worse off. So this should also take 1 class. Chapter 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 each will be taking 1 class. Brownian motion chapter 9 again 1 class. Chapter 10 1 class. Chapter 11 is theoretical, should get wrapped up in a 1 hour session itself. Chapter number 12 will take 2 classes for me to teach the content, and specifically there are 2-3 videos which basically covers all the past year questions of forward pricing or portfolio construction, because this is the part I was talking about. A lot of students struggle. So those are something which are not being directly covered in the class as such. A basic framework would be there. Apart from that, all the past year questions, at least for the last 10-14 years, you will find that in that particular video itself. And using that, you might be able to appreciate more, because that almost is an exhaustive set of lecture covering the various different scenarios. Greeks is a very small part. Again, will take me half an hour, so I can complete this with chapter 12 itself. Binomial model, again one class. Black-Scholes, again one class. Chapter 16 and 17 combined, it should take one class. I generally cover the continuous time, discrete time, everything concepts remains the same. It is just, let's say, things, instead of integrating, we are basically adding them up. Term structure of interest rates should take 3 classes. Credit risk takes 2 classes. Ruin theory, 2 classes. A third class is specifically for Poisson process. So again, that is something which you already have studied in paper CS1 or CS2. So let's take 2 classes. Runoff triangles, I usually take a single class. This time I'm more interested to cover more than the numerical component. What all assumptions are there? What differences does it take? So I guess it would take 2 lectures. So the number of classes which I basically have is 1, 2, 4 year, and a 5 year, and a 1 year less. So it's coming out to be close to 25 classes only. So again, even if I'm keeping just 3 classes in a week, in the next 2 months, I would be in a position to complete the syllabus. Theoretically speaking, that won't be the case, but yeah, that would get completed. Not 8 weeks. 2 weeks per classes if I take paper, then basically 3 months or so. So this was regarding the number of conceptual classes required. Back to you all. Any question?
Term structure is it somewhat similar to CM1?
CM1, there was term structure of interest rates. Here, term structure is there. Here, it's more to do with the models which you are going to use to model, let's say, RT, the interest rate, forward rate. There, the definition was there, what exactly it is. Here, we are trying to model it as a stochastic process. Keep with time how the values of it changes and the various models we can use to model it, and what are the advantages or the disadvantages of those models. So it is very rich in derivation content, and the second component is nothing but let's say the theoretical part. Application based as such, it's not there. Numericals you wouldn't really find, because most of them revolves around, we would be studying, let's say, 3 models. Let's say in particular, we are going to look at how that differential equation looks like, how to go about solving the differential equation, and then the final distribution, whether it's the normal distribution or the log normal distribution, its properties, and so on. Apart from that, that is the mapping part. Once attending the online session, any doubts, any queries you have? Yes, any queries, or should I wrap up the class? If you don't have any queries, please post a no in the chat box. There are no classes scheduled this weekend. Starting from next week, Tuesday and Thursday, the same time, 1 p.m. The classes would be there. I might keep additional classes as well. The timings of those are again something which I would be communicating in the group itself. Okay, I see no further queries then. That's it from my end. Thanks for attending the class.